Hello, everyone. Today we'll be discussing Plato's Gorgias. So let us begin. So here's a little bit of the setup of the dialogue. The dialogue begins with a discussion on the nature of oratory, being an orator, or rhetoric. And Gorgias and Plautus, the disciple of Gorgias, they pride themselves in being expert rhetoricians or orators. And what that means in the Athenian context is that there are people that pride themselves in being able to go and before a public forum, the Congress or something like that, and being able to speak and persuade the listeners to believe or do what the speaker wants them to do. And crucially, and this is what Socrates is going to object to, this ability to persuade others by using rhetoric is something that is divorced from the truth or the justice or the virtue of the thing that the rhetoricians are trying to persuade the others to do. In other words, Gorgias and Plautus pride themselves on having this faculty, this ability, this skill to persuade others to do things regardless of the truth or goodness or justice of the things that they try to persuade them. So it's supposed to be this skill to persuade others to make them do whatever it is you want them to do. So it's supposed to be a linguistic capacity to persuade others to do something. And again, and what's going to bother Socrates is that ability is divorced from truth and justice and goodness. Um, so Gorgias and Plautus pride themselves in having the ability to persuade others to do what they want, regardless of what they want, and of getting political power, of having themselves be appointed to positions of political power, or having their friends or whomever they want, right? They pride themselves of having this ability to persuade others to do what they want, get political power and structure society in a particular way, go to war, then end the war, redistribute property in a particular way, things like that. They think they have the know-how to convince the crowd to do what they want. And that is power. That's the kind of power that they have, power via language, via rhetorical skills. And they're very proud of it. They think hey, this is this great ability that we have. And they see themselves as teachers. They teach those skills to others. Crucially for our purposes, that's kind of the setup. Plautus claims that this faculty, this capacity, makes orators like tyrants powerful and happy. And the way that the word tyrant is being used here is someone's a tyrant if they are like the monarch. They're the one person who holds political power in a particular region, a particular state. But the power is not a power that is grounded in justice or in goodness, right? It's just power to do whatever the tyrant wants. So if the tyrant gets upset with someone, they want to kill them, they kill them, not because they have good reasons, not because it is good, not because it is just because the power the tyrant wants. So the power that Plautus prides himself in being able to attain and give to others is a power to do whatever they wish, regardless of truth and goodness. And Plautus claims that being a rhetorician, a good orator, gives them that power, and that they are thereby happy because they have that kind of power. Having power over others is a way of being happy. That's the good life. That's the happy life, and that's going to become like kind of the main topic for discussion for the dialogue. Socrates radically disagrees with all of this. Socrates does not think that this ability is even worth having, this faculty of convincing others to do whatever you want them to do. That is not a good thing to have, and that's something not worth having. It is a kind of flattery, claims Socrates, a mere simulacrum or imitation of something valuable. Having the power to do something good is a good power. Having the power to do something valuable, something just, those are good powers. Having the ability to convince someone to do whatever you want, it's a kind of a simulacrum of the good power. It's not real power. And he goes farther. Socrates claims that tyrants, as defined, are neither powerful in a peculiar conception of power that we'll look at shortly, and are not happy. To be a tyrant, to have this power over a group of people and to do whatever you want, when that's divorced from truth and from goodness, is not to be identified with happiness. In fact, the opposite, claims Socrates. If you're that kind of person, you're actually miserable. Um, that's what Socrates is going to argue for. So we'll look at some of his reasons, some of his arguments for claiming that. Um, Along the way, though, along the dialogue, Some very cool things happen, and I want to discuss those first. And those cool things are ways in which Plato illustrates via Socrates how to think well, how to engage with reason proper, how to attain truth. And Socrates points out some of the kind of typical fallacious ways of reasoning that other people have and kind of flags them as uh, mistaken ways of going about attaining truth. And here's some of the examples. So here's Socrates saying something he believes, one of the main theses of the dialogue. Socrates claims, "I say that the admirable and good person, man or woman, is happy, but that the one who's unjust and wicked is miserable." So here's a very grand Socratic, Platonic claim about the nature of the good life. The happy life, he who has a happy existence, is he who has a good life. And to have a good life is to have a life that is constituted by virtue or excellence. It is the good person, man or woman, that is he who's just, benevolent, kind, who develops the human capacities for moral, aesthetic, and intellectual activities. Those people are the ones that have the good life. Those are the ones that are happy. The ones that do the opposite of virtue is vice. So he who is unjust or wicked is not happy but miserable. So it's going to be one of the main kind of Platonic insights and one of the main conclusions of some of his cool arguments. So he says this to Plotus, and of course, Plotus has just presented a radically different conception of happy life. The happy life, so claims Plotus, is the one in which you have absolute control over others, absolute power over others, in a power that is divorced from goodness and virtue. So this is quite opposite from what Socrates claims. Then Plotus goes on to cite that other people agree with Plotus and not Socrates. And here's what Socrates says in reply. This is pretty cool. Plotus claims that Socrates' arguments are refuted by the fact that most people would prefer to be doers of injustice than sufferers of it. Socrates replies that popular opinion is not a mark of truth nor a refutation. Um, at one point in the dialogue, when Socrates says something like the first quote in page 137 here, just quoted, Plotus replies by saying, "But no, you're wrong, and here's how I can show that you're wrong. Most people agree with me. Most people prefer to be doers of injustice, to be like the tyrant, have power over, killing others and taking their property and things like that. And most people don't prefer to have the what are you calling the happy life, that you being virtuous. Most people prefer what I champion instead of what you champion. Therefore, you're wrong," says Plotus. And Socrates is pointing out that this is a fallacious way of reasoning. Even if it is true that most people agree with Plotus, that is not a refutation of the arguments that Socrates puts forth. That just appeal to popular opinion. And it's not a mark of truth either. So it's no legitimate philosophical move or way of objecting to Socrates that other people disagree with him, nor is there a mark of truth. And this kind of says a lot about the nature of philosophy as understood by Socrates and then everyone after that. If you're doing something like sociology, when you talk about things like moral codes that people might have, what you want to know, what the kind of the object of your inquiry is, what people believe. So pointing out that a lot of people think something about injustice and so on is very important for sociology, right? Because the very object of the inquiry is to figure out what people think in this subject matter, and that is it. I mean, you're trying to describe people's beliefs or behaviors or things like that, and that's fine, right? Sociology is great, uh, but here's what Socrates is pointing out: that is not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is philosophy, and philosophy does not try to figure out what people believe about injustice, what people believe about the happy life, what people believe about wickedness and being miserable, but rather what being happy is, what virtue is, and so on, the way in which virtue relates to happiness. So the truth or falsity of the beliefs that people have, that is the object of philosophy, not that people believe something, but whether it's true or false and how reasonable it is. And if that's the object of inquiry, pointing out that people disagree without providing the reasons why they disagree is yet not a good move in this game. It's not a good refutation of Socrates' points. So that's a cool observation about reasoning. Here's another kind of thesis that Socrates puts forth, and then another fallacious move by Plotus. So Socrates claims, "On my view of it, Plotus, a man who acts unjustly, a man who is unjust, is thoroughly miserable. So that's part of the same. And he continues. The more so, that is, the more miserable if he doesn't get his due punishment for the wrongdoing he commits. The less so if he pays and receives what is due at the hands of both gods and men. In other words, being unjust, doing wronging other people is the kind of thing that makes you miserable. You're miserable if you're unjust. And furthermore, here's the new thesis, the new kind of element in the story of Socrates. If you get punished, justifiably punished for your wickedness, you're less miserable than you would be if you do not get punished. In other words, if you do something immoral and then get away with it, there's no punishment, you're even more miserable than if there is a just punishment to your immorality. And to Plotus' ears, all of this sounds strange. So like not at all the way in which Plotus thinks. This is just alien to the way in which Plotus is approaching the topic. And in fact, he laughs. And after laughing at what Socrates just said, here's a very interesting observation that Socrates makes. What is this, Plotus? You're laughing. Is this now some father style of refutation, to laugh when someone makes a point instead of refuting it? Um, this is a very important observation that Socrates makes, though not very explicitly. If you're talking to a friend and there are all of these cultural assumptions, like about the value of patriotism, for example, and you say something that challenges or does not sit well with the deeply held assumption of your interlocutor, say you challenge whether patriotism is a good thing, there's a good chance that this person would just burst out laughter, right? Sometimes laughter becomes a way of refusing to think about a subject matter that is sensitive, or refusing to acknowledge a challenge to a deep assumption. You just burst laughing because you think that's so strange or alien or nonsensical or ridiculous what the person has said. But it's, and of course, no one likes being laughed at. So the person who's being laughed at, they might want to like rephrase what they said or take it back, or they might be tempted to remove the making of the point, to undermine the point they just made that triggered the laughter. In the observation that Socrates is tacitly making is that laughing or shaming someone for saying something might be a way in which we culturally inculcate some beliefs, right? And cultural inculturation, inculcation, sorry, of some beliefs about the way in which we govern ourselves. But that's not a philosophical move. In other words, if you're trying to figure out what truth is, which is what philosophers are trying to do, to be laughed at for saying something or to laugh at someone else for saying something is not is orthogonal to the truth, right? That someone laughs at something is not a reason for thinking that something is false or true, right? That is just the way in which we humans pass on cultures, but it's divorced from, it's orthogonal to, it does not have a bearing on the reasonableness or truth of the thing that is being said. And that's what Socrates is pointing out, that what he's saying, that being unjust is being miserable, and getting away with injustice makes you even more miserable. That's a claim about the connection of injustice and happiness. That someone laughs at that claim is no reason for thinking that the claim is false, much like when someone laughs at the negation of that claim, right? Laughing is not evidence. Um, and so that's another cool observation about reasoning well. Here's another one. Socrates says, okay, well, let me be the one who starts asking a question and you answer. But when we play this game, do the following. Answer me as though this were my first question to you. In other words, when you start thinking seriously, when you try to answer a deep question, what is justice, what is happiness, don't just bring to bear all of the assumptions that you already have. Don't just bring to bear a conclusion you already like and then try to identify reasons to try to defend it, right? Do not let the conclusions be driving your reasoning, but rather answer the questions in such a way as though they're the first time posed to you. In other words, look for the evidence and see where the evidence leads. And if the evidence leads against your assumption, then chances are your assumption is false. And if the evidence leads to your assumption, then great. Now it's a conclusion. It's not a mere assumption. So when you engage in dialogue with someone else, don't treat the dialogue as a way of defending at all costs the assumptions that you bring to bear in the discussion. Be open-minded and willing to challenge and question the adequacy of your own assumptions. So all of that is set up. Here is the philosophical question. So let's start up into a setup. It's a setup for this question: are tyrants powerful and happy? In Socrates is going to say no to both, and of course Plotus is going to say yes to both. So here's the question Plotus puts forth: do good orators, those that have the skill of persuading others to do what they want, have the greatest political power in cities? And here's what Socrates puts forth, a way of talking about the nature of power. No. If by having power you mean something that is good for the one who has the power, in that case, I think that orators have the least power in any city. In other words, Socrates is making a distinction between mere political power that we can define as ability to make things happen, convince the group to do something, like go to war, not go to war, things like that. Have property, have a position of political power, have a political role, things like that. Convincing people to do things, and that's political power. And Socrates says, who cares about that? Here's the real power, the one that's the true power, the one that matters. And that is the power that is good for he who has it, that it makes he who has it happy. The power that matters is the one that is conducive to your happiness, that is conducive to you having a life that is worth having. And that, Socrates is going to argue, is not mere political power. So Otis is very confused by this. So like, wait a minute, power that is not mere political power. Like, what are you talking about? He claims, really? Don't orators like tyrants put to death anyone they want and confiscate the property and banish from their city or the port anyone they see fit. In other words, Plotus is saying, but what are you talking about? Like, obviously, people with political power can kill whomever they want. I mean, if you're tyrants, they have no constraints. Confiscate property and deport people. Surely that's powerful. And then implicitly, Plotus is thinking, and therefore they're happy because they have a lot of power. Power is happiness. Political power. And here is a cool reply by Socrates. I say, Polus, that both orators and tyrants have the least power in the city, as I was saying just now, for they do just about nothing they want to, though they certainly do whatever they see more fit to do. So here's a distinction that Socrates makes, a very important distinction. In order for us to understand what Socrates is saying, let me lay it out a bit more carefully. So there are some activities, and let's call those doing what you want to. And that is doing what is good for you or doing what makes you happy. This is not how I have been using the expression doing what you want to, right? In contemporary discussions, we say you do what you want to mean you do whatever you desire, regardless of whether it's good or bad, just and unjust, right? We use the words do what you want to exactly in the way in which Polus does, but not Socrates, right? Socrates uses the words doing what you want to mean doing what is good for you, what makes you happy, with the assumption that that's really what we want to, what we truly want to is that which is good for us and that which makes us happy. And that is doing what we want to, or what we truly want to. And that's to be distinguished from doing what we see fit, what you see fit. And you do what you see fit when you act on the basis of how things appear to you. You act on the basis of a desire that you have, you act on the basis of a belief that you have, but the desire can be distorted or the belief can be false. And you're still acting as you see fit, right? You act as you see fit when you act on the basis of how things appear to you. So you think that having a particular career will make you happy. You take the career path, and then it turns out you're miserable. You acted as you see fit, namely as things appear to you. You thought the career was going to be make you happy, but Socrates will say you actually did not do what you wanted, because what you wanted was to be happy, and the career did not make you happy. So you were acting on a false belief or ignorance of what you truly wanted. You were mistaken about what you truly wanted, what was good for you, what make you happy, though you did act as you see fit. So Socrates thinks tyrants are the paradigmatic examples of people that have no constraints, and they can always act as they see fit. They act on the basis of what they think or what they feel. But Socrates is going to argue, by and large, they are not happy. They don't actually do what they truly want to do. They don't attain happiness. And that's going to be the conclusion of a co-argument that we'll see shortly. And here's the first cool movement for this argument. Socrates says, "Do you think it is good, then, if a person does whatever he sees most fit to do when he lacks intelligence? In other words, if they're ignorant and they act on the basis of what they think, what seems to them at the moment, but they have false beliefs, do you call this, Paulus, having great power? Is power, great power, or true power, the one to act on the basis of ignorance or false beliefs?" And Otis is going to give in. Oh, no, no, like I don't mean by that. By power, I didn't mean that. I was thinking I was getting something better. Thanks, Plotus. And this is the opening for Socrates' argument. So Plotus grants that true power is the one that is good for the person that has it. That, in other words, that is the kind of power that is conducive to, that leads to, that brings about happiness. And if and happiness requires knowledge. If you act out of ignorance, if you're acting from false beliefs, you are not going to attain happiness, and you don't have the right kind of power. So Paulus grants that the kind of power that is merely political power, that does not aim at the happiness of he who has it, is not the good kind of power. So this gives rise to the whole argument. Here's the argument. I'm going to give you all the quotes in which I have. So I'm just going to extract it from other quotes. Here's the main argument for that Socrates puts forth against tyrants being both happy and powerful. So here's the main thesis that I've been laying down a little bit already, but let me make it explicit. We humans only truly want what is good for us, what is conducive to the good life, what is conducive to happiness. And here are some of the examples that Socrates thinks, oh, those are the things we truly want. Those are the ones that do make us happy. Health, the good of the body, wisdom, virtue, love, and friendship. There may be a few others, appreciation of art, for example, intellectual formation, for example. But these health, wisdom, virtue, love, and friendship are at the heart, the main real candidates for what things that are good for us. But anyway, those are just examples to give you a sense. What matters is that we only truly want what is good for us. And if there are other things that are also good for us that are not in this list, well, we want those too, right? It is that they're actually good for us that makes those things be the proper object of our true desires. Desires of the heart, some people say. The desires of the heart, because they do truly fulfill and satisfy. They're truly good for us. We have a lot of desires. Some of them do not aim at those things that are actually good for us. Sometimes we desire what is bad for us. And when we get it, of course, we're miserable because it was bad for us. But things that are truly good for us, those are the ones that we truly desire. That's the main claim, number one. And here's a more kind of psychological claim. Everything we do, anything we do it because either we think that it is good for us, or B, we think that it leads to something that is good for us. Every time we do what we act as we see fit, right? We act on the basis of our beliefs and our judgments and the way we think. We're consciously or unconsciously aiming at one or two things. One, that which is good for us, the health, wisdom, virtue, love, and friendship. Or we're willing to do things that we think will lead to them or are conducive to that. So knowledge, for example, is not on the list, but let's throw it in. You may not like the idea of reading books intrinsically, but you do think, you recognize that having knowledge is valuable. So going through the reading of the books so that you can get the knowledge. Reading the books may be category B. It leads to something good. Or perhaps here's a better one, exercising, going to the gym. If you're not in great shape, especially, you might not really like the activity of going to the gym. If you're in better shape, it feels better. But there is this uncomfort that is associated with some, anyway, exercise activities. And people that engage in those that don't quite like the exercise as such, they still do it, not because it makes them miserable, but rather because the exercise leads to something being good for them, namely health. So we do what we do either because it leads to something good like health, or because it is conducive to something that is good, like we exercise so that we're healthy. But anyway, that number two is the psychological observation about why we do what we do. Here's an important also kind of description of the way tyrants as defined behave. So tyrants engage in activities like killing people because they dislike them, like you're angry with someone, you kill them. Confiscating people because they feel like it, right? It's a mere exercise of power for power's sake. It's a mere exercise of political power. I want to take your property, so I will because I can. I want to, kill that person. I do because I can. I want to deport that person from my territory. I do because I can, right? It's a mere exercise of power for power's sake. That's what tyrants do by definition, right? That's what it is to be a tyrant. That's what Plotus puts forth. And that is what Socrates thinks is not true power, and it's not the person who's like that, a tyrant like that, is not happy. So, four, now is connecting two and three. The kinds of activities that tyrants, as defined, engage in, that is, killing people, confiscating property, and so on, are neither good in themselves, category A in premise two, nor do they lead to anything good, category B in premise number two. In other words, the kinds of things that tyrants do when they exercise in power for its own sake are neither themselves good, nor do they lead to something good. And yet the tyrants wouldn't do that unless they thought it was good or led to something good, right? That's what premise number two says. We all do what we do because we think it is good for us. It's conducive to that. It's constitutive of the good life, or because it leads to something good, something that will make us happy. And premise number four says the things that tyrants do are not neither of those categories. And that's all we need, right? The conclusions now follow. Therefore, tyrants do not do what they truly want. They do act as they see fit, right, as they believe, but they don't do what they truly want. Why? Because what they want is happiness. Everyone wants happiness. Rather, they act from ignorance. They act on the basis of the false belief that exercising pure power is good for them or is conducive to something that is good for them. But exercise of pure power is not that. It's not one of the things in the list in the premise number one. So they're mistaken about what they're pursuing, and they're mistaken about whether or not they will attain happiness. They act from ignorance. Um, Premise number six, we've seen this already. True power is good for he who possesses it. Uh, Premise number seven, having the power to do things that are neither good nor lead to something good is not true power. It's just wasting energy. But that's what five says. That's what tyrants do. For tyrants do not have true power. The kind of power that tyrants have is the one that is just exercising energy, just using energy, and it's just hurting others. It's just destroying. It's not good for them. It's not good for the subjects. It's not good for anyone. And they mistakenly do it because they think it would make them happy. It would be good for them, but it's not. So tyrants do not have true power. They have blunt political power, but not true power. What's true power? The one that is good for them. So what the kind of power that they have is not good for them, and therefore it's not conducive to their happiness. They're not happy. Okay, I'll end here. I'll see you next time.